have seen cloning in all sorts of science fiction stories and films. It has teased our imagination of what we would do with our own clone, or groups of clones. The applications could be tremendous. Build the most efficient workforce, or army, or let the soulless clones do the deadly work of constructing the foundations of our colonies on Mars. Here is where we answer the question of why we haven't cloned humans, and beg to question, have we already created clones? Video, give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for future tech videos. Without further ado, let's get into it. The morality. It comes as no surprise that the idea of human clones is unsettling because it violates the fundamental moral understanding that we are all different and equally valuable. It provokes us to lie to ourselves and deny a human clone's right as it is essentially a human. And since we cannot prove the existence of our own souls, we have no authority to determine that of clones. So fairness insists that we let clones have free will. Therefore, having a squad of duplicates to do our bidding is fundamentally slavery. According to developmental biologist and stem cell scientist at the Francis Crick Institute in London, Robin Lavelle-Badge, quote, "No one's really suggesting any good reason for human cloning. There's a much easier way to recreate yourself that doesn't involve ethical issues. Have a baby," end quote. Plus, the traditional way brings much more pleasure, don't you agree? And when asked about the people hoping to replicate a beloved dead child or spouse, or even a long-gone pet, cloning won't fill that void. Lavelle-Badge says emphatically, quote, "In fact, it would be counterproductive because you would end up with an individual who is clearly not the same person, and it would be more traumatic for everyone involved," end quote. Therefore, the personality of the clone would greatly differ from the original. This has been noticed in identical twins. As they age, twins often have different looks, interests, and personalities. Plus, the replicant would start off as a baby. For science fiction references, remember the origins of Judge Dredd, played by Sylvester Stallone in the 1995 blockbuster Judge Dredd. The protagonist and his villainous brother both started off as babies. So, for innate reasons of human rights and not recreating a sequel of Pet Sematary, investigations into cloning have been mainly divided into two areas: reproductive cloning, mainly to improve livestock breeding, and therapeutic cloning aimed at growing cells, not whole humans, that can be used to treat diseases. Therapeutic cloning. Cloning technology has definitely led to new treatments for rare, devastating diseases. That's the reason there are handfuls of fatalities around the world still conducting clone research. Shukarat Mitalipov, director of the Oregon Health and Science University Center for Embryonic Cell and Gene Therapy, has designed a way to keep women with mitochondrial diseases from passing on the devastating illness to their children. He was able to accomplish this by transferring the nucleus of her eggs into the healthy egg cell of another woman whose nucleus had been removed. In this procedure, the director is able to leave most of all the damaged mitochondria behind, thus preventing disease. It's a technique that results in a so-called three-parent baby. This technique was proven in the 1990s in the US and a few times elsewhere to treat women with infertility. One of the most recent three-parent baby was born in Mexico in 2016 to avoid passing on a disease carried by the mother. However, the boy did inherit some of his mother's damaged mitochondrial DNA, and the family has declined follow-up research, hoping he won't develop any health problems. They prefer to stay out of the lab and maintain their peace. In other clone news, in the mid-2000s, a Japanese scientist named Shinya Yamanaka developed a method of artificially creating cells from an adult. Yamanaka says he was inspired by Dolly to realize that all cells have the same genetic material, and thus could theoretically be reprogrammed into any other cell type. The realization led him to develop a method for creating induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs, for the mature cells. iPSCs can be made to grow into any type of tissue in the body. So to avoid the high cost and inhumanity of making clones to use as spare body parts, similar to the plot of The Island, starring Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson, released in 2005. Nowadays, these cells are being used in international research for modeling diseases and screening drugs, and they are just beginning to find use in therapies. First in macular degeneration, which is an eye disease. Plus, according to biologist Egan, they're so easy to use that even the college sophomores he teaches at Harvard can make them. So if the aspect of cloning is so simple, and they've already told us that clones often die the embryo age, it makes us ponder, what else do they know? And what else have they tried? What we do know. What we do know is that somatic cell nuclear transfer, unlike embryo splitting, which can only yield a few copies, can theoretically produce an indefinite number of clones from a single donor. We know that a sheep named Dolly was successfully cloned in 1996 by Keith Campbell, Ian Wilmot, and their colleagues at the Roslin Institute in Scotland. We are aware that since then, scientists have cloned more than 20 species of animals, from cows, pigs, dogs, to rabbits and mice. And now we know that in 2018, Chinese Academy of Scientists, Dr. Zhen Lu, culminated the birth of 2 female macaques. This is, as far as we know, the first successful cloning of primates. This is a tremendous accomplishment because the cloning technique in this study may also apply to other primates, such as humans. And although the Chinese Academy of Sciences claim they have no interest in human cloning, we know authoritative groups omit truth. Peculiar cases. In that regard, George Green, a former elite insider and whistleblower, exposed a radical elite plan in the early 90s, stating that the elites will find ways to control all resources, including human resources. Depopulation is vital in their quest, and rather it be through clones or AI robots, they'd see their plan fulfilled. He said their plan was to start major wars in the Middle East. This has already come to fruition as Bush and Obama destabilized Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. He also explained that the technology permitted in mainstream today is technology the elites have had 20 or 30 years ago, and this includes human cloning. A religious cult called the Raelians announced a religious command from aliens that told them to go forward with cloning humans 3 months after Dolly's birth was announced. They created the group Clonaid, led by biochemist Bridget Bosselier. The Raelians operated a laboratory in Nitro, West Virginia, aimed at human cloning until it was stopped by the FDA. Undaunted, Clonaid moved its operations to the Bahamas. Then, in 2002, they announced that the first cloned baby, named Eve, had been born. Then, by 2004, Clonaid claimed to have successfully brought to life 14 other human clones. None of these claims were ever proven, as the group said they wanted to maintain the clones' privacy and protect their families. It appears still to be fiction, but is it? In 2008, The Guardian reported that Britain's first human-animal hybrid embryos had been created, which formed the first crucial step towards a supply of stem cells that could be used to investigate debilitating and untreatable conditions such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and motor neuron disease. Dr. Lyle Armstrong of Newcastle University presented his preliminary data and said such experiments would not lead to hybrid human-animal babies, or even to direct medical therapies. Yet they still created a human-cow hybrid embryo. And aside from human-cow hybrids, there are already human-pig hybrid embryos. Geez. Are human clones already walking among us today? Some people speculate that powerful influencers have been cloned. Andrew Garfield's resemblance to Leon Trotsky, Queen Latifah's to Zora Hurston, and Nicolas Cage's resemblance to Lieutenant Robert M. Smith have all inspired a vast conspiracy, suggesting that there are clones out there and not coincidental doppelgangers. The coincidences keep mounting up, with other likenesses like Serena Williams to Betty Shabazz, Oscar Isaacs to confidant of Italian Renaissance artist Raphael, Brad Pitts to 19th century Swiss psychologist who developed the Rorschach test, Herman Rorschach, and many more. So what are your thoughts about human cloning? Have you ever thought about cloning yourself? And if you did, what would you do with your clone? Let us know in the comments section below.